There haven't been a lot of games on my most anticipated list for this year, but one of my top picks has to be, of course, the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe Edition. I'm not going to beat around the bush here. If you haven't yet played the Stanley Parable and you really love quirky game with a sense of fourth wall breaking humor, you owe it to yourself to go back and play the original game. The Stanley Parable to this day is probably one of my favorite indie games of all time, second only maybe to The Forest. The Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe Edition started out as a one-for-one faithful HD remaster of the original game, aimed for release back in 2018. Clearly, as you might have guessed, that never came to pass. Instead, the game got bumped back to 2019, then 2020, then 2021, and finally now 2022. One could almost be forgiven for saying that Ultra Deluxe Edition's launch has been delayed almost as long as the Yandere Simulator, which, perhaps for the best, still remains in limbo. The premise of the Stanley Parable is fairly straightforward. In fact, it is so ridiculously simple, I'll just let the narrator describe it for me.
This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy.
The Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe Edition is, in at least some ways, a clear-cut example of a game somewhat overstaying its welcome. The Stanley Parable in its original form is probably as close to a perfect game as anything I've ever played, in terms of achieving what it set out to do. The narration was spot on, the quirky, responsive nature of the map design was fantastic, and the story and gameplay meshed to create this shared sensation that, no matter how desperately you would try to break away from what the narrator wanted you to do, you'd always find yourself inevitably being pulled back in. The Stanley Parable was basically the Hotel California of video games. On the surface level, very easygoing and non-threatening, but in reality a lot of the underlying tension feels like something out of a horror film, where the game tries to distract you with its clever uses of obnoxious, fourth-wall-breaking comedic dialogue. There are simply so many creative contrasts in terms of theme, gameplay design, art direction, and all the other minimalistic elements in the Stanley Parable that I have no hesitation in saying that it was, and still remains, a once-in-a-generation piece of gaming art. The problem is, the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe Edition does not meet the same standard as its predecessor. Instead, Ultra Deluxe Edition proves that you can very easily have too much of a good thing. Comedy is a very subjective thing, and the Stanley Parable is, in almost every conceivable way, a straightforward, unapologetic walking simulator. You can play through and complete all the possible endings of the original Stanley Parable by using nothing more than your WASD keys and your mouse. So if you're looking for a game that has more traditional gameplay, with fast-paced action, creative platforming, or atmospheric puzzle solving, I can tell you straight off the bat that neither the original Stanley Parable nor this Ultra Deluxe Edition will likely really appeal to you. It's just a game about walking, listening, and being as non-verbally passive-aggressive as humanly possible. Luckily, I specialize in that last category. The original game worked because it was so simple at its core. The gameplay was so mind-numbingly generic and repetitive that it freed you up from mostly thinking about what you were doing, to instead just listen to the narrator and treat the experience like a choose-your-own-adventure type audiobook, albeit with a fourth-wall-breaking dungeon master who's just as passive-aggressive as you are, and, unlike you, wields unlimited power. Whereas the original game deliberately took a very micro-sized scope, this one tries to go in the opposite direction, taking you out of the original office loop and instead bringing you to museums, junkyards, apocalyptic time-traveling futures, etc. All while really not adding anything new to the core story. And thus, when you would deviate from what the narrator wanted you to do in these new areas, it doesn't really give you that petty, almost spiteful satisfaction that you previously got in the original game, at least never to the same degree. Several of the new story choices you can make do have that familiar ring of what came before, while still managing to pull off something new and be pretty damn funny as a result. Probably the best example of this is the bucket. The first Stanley Parable game had a lot of one-and-done type gags, but not a lot that stayed with you and played out at a slower pace. I suppose the adventure line would be the only example I guess I could point to from the original game. But here in Ultra Deluxe Edition, having the bucket with you as you go through both the original game's content and the new material allows you to hear new voice lines from the narrator as he narrates dialogue on behalf of both you and the bucket. Or he'll even go as far as to question the strange, unspoken, intimate relationship he feels you have with said bucket. And it just gets weirder and weirder and weirder over time.
You see, he's not listening. He's still taking orders from the bucket. You know, once upon a time it was me he took orders from, me he trusted and listened to. Now all he cares about is his awful bucket, this stupid hunk of metal. From now on, he's just going to cling to this bucket, this cold, empty bucket, this sort of shiny bucket. Well, I'll give it this. The bucket does have a nice shine to it. Yes, I suppose on closer inspection, but it doesn't quite look like your average hardware store bucket. It's just a little more, what am I trying to say? Sturdier, more capable of transporting liquid. Like it would be better at moving an amount of water from one room to another. Oh my God, what am I saying? Better at carrying water from room to room. It's a bucket. It's literally just a bucket. Oh no, I'm having feelings for the bucket. No. What's going on? Why do I want to be with the bucket? Hear what the bucket has to say. Do anything it asks. What's wrong with me? I don't understand. Perhaps if I had the bucket, this would be less confusing. Yes, the bucket could tell me what to do in this troublesome situation. Stanley, give me the bucket. Give it to me. Give me the bucket, Stanley. I need it. Give it to me now. Give it or I'll...
Or you have that moment when you're in the hole. And no, that's not a reference to solitary confinement, but it does ultimately work out to fulfill the same function here. Without spoiling too much, there's a moment where the narrator is showing off some new features he's been working on, and one of these is the hole.
Stanley, here's an idea that I'm truly fond of. It's never been done before in a video game. This is in fact a hole that you can fall down forever. That's right, infinite falling. You can fall until the end of time, if you like. A stunning leap forward for video games as a medium. You see, isn't it wonderful? One of my more ingenious concoctions, if I do say so. Now then, since you've gotten to see the infinite hole, you can press the teleport button to pop back up to the top, and we can continue onward. Okay, Stanley, I don't know quite how to say this tactfully, but it's possible that I slightly exaggerated the infinite nature of the hole. Is it a very, very deep hole? To be certain it is. It's an extremely deep hole. I don't want anyone to say that it isn't an astonishingly deep hole. It is. Is it infinite? Well, that sort of depends on your definition of infinity. From one perspective, the infinite is merely philosophical in nature. It's more of a...
Also, you have this recurring gag involving in-game collectible Stanley figurines.
You found one of them. One of the miniature Stanley figurines. Remember, no reward for collecting all of these, only the intrinsic pleasure of a job well done. You can't buy that sort of happiness, Stanley. God knows I've tried. So, I implore you to savor each and every moment you come across one of these beautiful figurines.
But a lot of the rest of the new content is dedicated just to different versions of the same exact joke being beaten to death again and again and again and again and again and again and again. For your entire time in-game, being, oh, look at us, we're so clever for making the Stanley Parable. You want meaningful new content or a sequel or anything remotely substantial? Well, fuck you then. And if you don't like not having new quality content, well, fuck you again. If I wanted to experience that mentality, I wouldn't need the Stanley Parable for that. I could simply look to talentless Hollywood hacks like the ones at Lucasfilm or Disney as a whole. Any joke that gets repeated too often gets old really, really quickly. And if the joke wasn't all that funny in the first place, it gets old even quicker. Ultra Deluxe also changes a few things from the original game's content, notably including the secret Minecraft-related story ending, which also included a Portal 1 sequence. These have been swapped out in favor of Rocket League and Firewatch. I'm not sure why. Something tells me that Valve didn't deny the developer permission to continue using Portal 1 references, considering how open Valve is to pretty much letting anyone and everyone play with their stuff, and I doubt Microsoft would care all that much about Minecraft continuing to make an appearance. I'm guessing this was done to make more modern references, but even then it doesn't make a lot of sense, because if Rocket League and Firewatch are the developer's idea of modern indie gaming, they must have been stuck in a time capsule, because we're a long way from 2015 and 2016. Also, these third-party game appearances, especially that of Firewatch, feels a lot shorter and less creative in some sense than those of the first game. The narrator literally reuses the same gag he uses it in another section, that of just creating literal walls out of the ground to block you from going where you want to go. And then when doing so, he basically says variations of the same exact line. Again, there were a lot of moments where I did laugh with genuine amusement and entertainment, and there's also some honestly very nostalgic moments, like when you go through the virtual Stanley Parable Museum, which contains a lot of genuine and some obviously fake mementos from the entire developmental history of the original game. Starting with what software the developers used to make the original mod, then the process of creating the original game on the Source 1 engine, to the original game's release, and its subsequent audience reception. There is a lot to appreciate there. Also, need I add that I love the deliberately low-quality, almost children's theme park ride nature of how Ultra Deluxe Edition introduces you to the new content. It's honestly just great.
Oh, new content? What does that mean, new content?
Hello, and thank you for playing the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. As you may know, the Stanley Parable was a video game released in 2013 on home computers. After receiving critical and commercial success, it was expanded upon in 2022 with the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, a reimagining of the game for consoles and home computers. The Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe features exciting new content that broadens and expands the world of the Stanley Parable, delighting audiences the world over. Please, step inside and see what thrilling new adventures await in the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe.
Overall, I'm incredibly mixed about how I feel about Ultra Deluxe Edition. On one hand, it clearly did not live up to the reasonably high expectations I had going into it, particularly when it comes to the nature of the new content and the questionable quality of its dry-witted comedy. But on the other hand, if you're only looking to judge the game based on the objective amount of new content rather than its subjective quality, you're getting basically twice the normal scope and length of the original game at twice the price for said original game. So I can't complain that you're getting ripped off in any means because of that increased price. I'm not normally one for scoring games, but if the original Stanley Parable was a 9 or 10 out of 10, then Ultra Deluxe at best is maybe a 6 or a 7. There are very few new interactions or sequences that live up to the original simplistic creativity of the original game, and there are a few that explicitly feel poorly written, but most of it averages out to be just okay, maybe slightly above average. Unless you're a diehard fan already, I don't think Ultra Deluxe could possibly appeal to you. And even if you're a diehard fan, as I would probably consider myself to be, I don't see any scenario where you'll realistically play Ultra Deluxe more than once or twice in your lifetime before giving up on it. If nothing else, Ultra Deluxe makes me want to go back and replay the original game, back when the writing and narrating didn't overstay its welcome. As well as how the vague, generic story, by its very nature, made the comedy even funnier because of that contrast. And the fun philosophical exploration of deeper themes like predetermination versus free will that the original game explored so well. We already have so many other modern games like The Outer Worlds that riff on the exact same themes as Ultra Deluxe Edition, like excessive commercialization and nostalgia versus reality that, by comparison, Ultra Deluxe's superficial, vague, comedic overtones fall on the ears like a cheap opening punchline that rapidly deflates like a balloon at a children's birthday party. I'm aware that this has already been a fairly lengthy video, so for all those reasons and others besides, I'm unfortunately thumbing down Ultra Deluxe Edition. If you haven't yet played through or seen a full playthrough of the Stanley Parable, go buy the original game. It is ridiculously cheap on Steam if you grab it during pretty much any Steam sale, or if you buy a Steam key off any third-party site, and it's well worth every last penny. Don't buy this version, or at the very least, put it on your wish list and wait a few months to go get it on sale for like 50% off or something. As ever, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button and comment below what you think of the game. Comments really help my videos get boosted in the algorithm, and plus I read and respond to nearly all the comments I get. So even if you just want to drop a comment to say hi or get my opinion on something, even if it's unrelated, I'll be more than happy to chat with you down below. Believe me, it's always fun to have an ongoing conversation, because right now I'm just kind of talking into the void. Likewise, subscribing and clicking the bell really helps. I know it's cliche, no one wants to hear about it, but again, the YouTube algorithm is a pain in the ass to deal with. Plus, I'm looking to hit 2,000 subscribers fairly soon. That'd be a nice goal to hit. This is Warrior Dan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody. Stay safe and peace out.
Item 4. Is this a bucket? What? Are you hallucinating? This is a tractor. It's an enormous machine that tills the earth. I thought this was a gimmick. How on earth did you manage to screw it up? Absolutely incredible. Let's just move on to the next one.